everyone, and welcome to my next video tutorial. So in this one I'm looking at another part of the sub-assemblies series, and this one is to do with how to prepare a base if you are to paint the model separate to the base, which is typical practice for me. I just find it a lot easier to paint the model and the base itself when I've left them separate. So before any paint is applied or anything, leaving the model separate to the base, I start to just use a relatively fine brush and using a light coloured or noticeable colour paint just to start to sort of map around the contact points of the model itself. So this model in particular, the White Scars Captain, has one foot that's just planted on the ground, but then the other one that's part of this sort of part of a scenic part. He's standing on that little bit of rubble there. So I want to be able to apply the sand without getting the sand on those contact points, because I still want the model to be able to adhere to the base itself. So basically I'm just kind of mapping out the boundary for that. There we go. So the next step is to start to apply some of the base elements. So just going for something pretty plain and simple here. I'm going to start applying some of these little slate rocks. Just kind of arrange them in a way that looks natural. And I'd recommend doing a dry fit for this before you start sort of just gluing everything down, just making sure that it all looks nice where it's sitting and it's all working together well. So applying that with super glue. You could use PVA glue for this, but the only issue with that is the drying time. I like to use Loctite super glue because it just dries so quick and it allows you to start to move on to the next elements, which is to start applying the sand. So for that I am using PVA glue and applying that with a pretty old brush, as you can tell. Sometimes I like to thin this out with a little bit of water just to give it a little bit more workability. This is straight from the bottle, but which, yeah, not a big deal. Still goes on easy enough. Yeah, as I said, adding a little bit of water just allows it to have a bit more fluidity. Allows you to get around those hard to reach places, but this is fine for this kind of job. Alright, so yeah, obviously I've avoided those contact points that I've mapped out, and yeah, now it's time to start applying the sand. So I think I mentioned in previous videos that I like to use a mix. I think this is a mix of 3 or 4 different grains of sand. Some of them are modeling. I think they are all modeling, purpose-made sand mixes. So yeah, so what I like to do now is just just sprinkle it on, get rid of the excess, and get rid of those little bits that are hanging onto the sides of the rocks there that are kind of look a bit out of place, unnatural, kind of gravity defying little grains of sand, especially around the edges there. yes, it's good to clean it up at this stage because going over and sealing it later makes it a bit harder to do cleanup like this. A neat little tip there. Pour it over a sheet of paper so that you can easily pour it back into the tub. Alright, so there it is. So now you can see that where it's touching the base, those contact points are nice and free of sand. And yeah, it's good to go. Alright, so now the model's been painted. The base has been partly painted, it's not quite done to completion. But now is the point where I'm going to apply the model to the base. So first things first, I'm clipping the model off of the those rods or pins and leaving them on, not removing them completely, because they're going to help to give it a bit more of a bind to the base itself. So basically this step now is to line it up, and I'm going to be totally honest with you, and this is it will be apparent in this video that it's a kind of a trial and error sort of thing. It's a bit hard to kind of get it exactly where you need it to be when you've got those pins in the way. So this is a little trick that I use. Just use a nice bright coloured paint and apply it right to the ends of the pins, and then use that as kind of a guide for where it's going to sit. And then as you can see, it's applied the paint there, and then the next step is to start to drill that out. I'm going to take it off that first. So using the drill, obviously the drill bit is the same size, same thickness as the pins that I'm using, so that it fits nice and snug. So just drilling those out all the way through. And then the moment of truth to see if it lines up nicely. So I wasn't happy with how this was going. It doesn't line up nicely with those clear contact points. You can tell the left foot is sitting up on top of some of the grains of sand, so it's not sitting nice and flat and flush with the base. So I thought, let's try again. So first things first, going back to step one for this, applying a bit more paint and trying to remap out where I'm going to place those holes. But there's no, I mean, you might end up drilling a million holes trying to get this to line up properly, but as long as there's not too much kind of overlap in where you're drilling the holes, it's really not a big deal, because you've got that nice wide contact point where the plastic of the model is going to be flush with the plastic of the base. The glue should do most of the work, and the pins are just kind of there to give it a bit more stability. So just having another go with that one. I was more happy with this one, but this was not the final. So yeah, as I said, a bit of trial and error. It can be quite hard to get it to line up perfectly, and there's you better to try and get it to line up, almost perfectly, rather than settling for the bottom model not sort of sitting nice and flush on the base. So you might have noticed I actually did drill another hole, or another couple of holes, but I'm much happier with how that's sitting. You can tell that left foot's sitting flush on the base. So moving on, and I'm happy with that. So starting to apply some super glue, first to the pins and then also applying it to the bottom of the parts of the model there. You could even use plastic glue on the plastic parts of the model. You might have watched one of my previous sub-assembly videos where I recommend scraping back some of the paint if you were to use plastic glue. I felt confident enough in using super glue for this, so I just went ahead and used it. So after you've held that down a little bit and just get it to bind nicely, I recommend maybe leaving it for a couple of hours just to make sure that the super glue starts to dry. And then moving on to the next step, which is starting to fill in some of these little holes. So, because I've left a little bit more room around the edge, there's more area there on the base which doesn't have the sand applied to it. So this step is applying the sand to that area, and also just kind of closing in that little bit of a gap that's showing itself under those rocks and that little bit of the debris, and also under that foot there. It's quite good, but still not perfectly flush with the base. So yeah, this step just kind of just fixes that up, and yeah, so again, applying a bit of sand. Make sure to get rid of the excess. Yeah. So obviously the glue with the sand applied to it is enough to give enough height to close that gap, which works quite well. You may have noticed I've actually had to remove that rock from the back of the base there. I think it kind of got in the way of the cloak as I started to dry fit the parts of the model together. So yeah, maybe just a little bit of a lack of planning, but yeah, the base still looks fine without it. So this step is just to start to apply some of the paint after you've applied a watered down PVA seal over the top, and basically just using the same method, same paints that you'd used for painting the rest of the base, just to just make it all fit. So yeah, and that's basically it. So I hope this video has been helpful, even if it is a quick one. Yeah, definitely a huge recommendation, painting the model separate to the base. Maybe sometimes I go a little bit too crazy with sub-assemblies, but this is definitely a big one. It allows you to put more effort into the base itself, and don't have to worry about things obscuring and stuff like that. So yeah, it just helps a lot. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and thanks.